My name is Gaspar from Taco Morelos. Bienvenidos a Inside Minneapolis.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Inside Minneapolis. I'm Phill Lindsay and I'm standing here at the Acadia Cafe. That's along Eat Street here in South Minneapolis. Eat Street's the moniker they've given to a very vital corridor from about Grant Street down by the Convention Center all the way down to 29th Street through South Minneapolis. And my guests and I will be talking about the food of Eat Street. We'll also be talking about the businesses, the development aspect of what's been going along here, and also about getting the word out about Eat Street. Now I'll be back with my first guest to talk a little bit about that right after we take a look at some of the images of the restaurants along here. And I got to tell the crew here and folks, you got to get up and get to work because we're about to tape, okay? So put the food down. I'll be back with Raghavan, Iyer and Marilyn Kaye in just a moment. Well, that was a look at just some of the restaurant frontages along Eat Street here. And with me now are a couple people that we're going to talk with about the food and some of the changes that people have seen along Nicollet Avenue. Raghavan, Iyer, pleasure to have you here.
Nice to meet you too, Phil.
Nice to have you on the show. And Marilyn Kaye.
Hi.
Actually an old friend. It's nice to see you again and have you here. And I should mention, because we're on Eat Street, one of the things we're doing is we're being surrounded by food. And on the set right now and in their hands are grape leaves from Christos Greek restaurant a little bit down the street. So they're good. Okay. That was
very tasty.
Unsolicited recommendation.
Yeah, sure.
And in fact, we had to fight off the crew. Earlier they were saying, I'll eat those if they won't. So that's pretty good. Well, Eat Street, I mean, the name sort of sums it up, although there's a lot of other things that go on along Nicollet Avenue. But a little background on each of you. I know, Raghavan, you've got experience in the food industry. You've taught cooking. You still teach?
I still teach cooking a lot around the Twin Cities. I teach at places like Byerly's, Kitchen Window, Cooks of Crocus Hill.
Oh, all right.
And I do a lot of food consulting for corporate clients. I develop recipes for them.
And you have a business known as The Essence of Time.
As The Essence of Time, which is a food consulting business. I do a lot of special events for corporate clients and also for private clients. And I have a cookbook coming out. Unfortunately, I can't talk a whole lot about it because under contractual reasons.
It's on an embargo or something?
But it is a cookbook on Indian cooking.
That sounds wonderful. About when will it come out? Can you mention that?
In about a year.
In about a year? Yeah. Okay. Just in time for the holidays?
It will be probably very early January 2001.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to that.
So we're good.
And you've had restaurant experience too, I understand.
I've been in restaurants a long time. One of my educational degrees is from Michigan State University in Hotel Restaurant Management.
Oh, okay, so you're very serious about the food
well,
business.
Yeah,
you're
it's
running
my
businesses,
life.
You've got degrees in it.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. And I know you eat at a few of them too.
I eat at a lot of them.
That's good. Well, we're going to talk about some of that as it pertains here to each. And Marilyn, you go back in the Whittier neighborhood.
About 25 years.
About 25 years. Homeowner in Whittier?
Homeowner for about 22 years.
Right. Yeah, and you've been involved in the neighborhood before that. And something that I don't know if this is always the first thing you mention to people, but I know that you also had a hand in creating the Whittier Globe.
One of the founders of the community newspaper.
Yeah, and I know that the Globe, certainly when I used to live in this neighborhood, was an important organ, if you will, for understanding and knowing what was going on in the community.
Yes, I remember doing stories about new businesses and new restaurants.
Yeah, back then. Back then. But nowadays, you're involved in some very interesting things. You're the first guest I've been able to introduce as an officiant. You are a wedding officiant.
Wedding officiant.
And you help with marriages. In
preparation and enrichment.
Yeah, and personal coaching, professional coaching.
Personal and professional coaching and spiritual direction.
Now, just as a thumbnail, what does that mean? What do you do? Somebody calls you up and says, I need some personal direction, and what, they're heading north? Or
yeah,
what do you do?
It's supporting people to have the life they want in a variety of areas.
Okay, that's very succinct. I mean, that's your mission. You do that, and then it gets particular with your individual clients.
Right. Could be career, personal, relationships, a whole variety of areas. Yes.
And do you officiate at a number? I mean, does this happen? You're being the official at weddings?
Yes, I have a wedding coming up this 23rd of December that I'm officiating.
Very interesting. Impressions from 20-some years ago. And we don't have to stay right on the topic of food and restaurants, but as you think back into the 70s and Nicollet Avenue, what are some of the impressions that come to your mind?
Well, I remember the name that people called the neighborhood, they call it the hole in the donut. There was no identity or no name, and I was part of the original naming, finding a name, Whittier.
Well, I didn't realize it was that recent.
Yes, 25 plus years ago.
Now, is this named after the great poet?
Well, the school was John Greenleaf Whittier School on Blaisdell and 26th.
Right, and that was already so named.
Yes.
Okay.
And so that was kind of a key area, and the neighborhood took that name.
Well, it's like it wasn't New York and it was named PS 128. I mean, we'd be sitting in the PS 128 neighborhood or something. Well, that's great. I didn't realize that Whittier had taken its name that recently.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Raghavan, one question I want to talk with you about, and I don't know, have you ever worked in a restaurant, Marilyn? In any
2 days.
2 days. That doesn't quite count. Maybe enough to know what you wanted not to do. But I also managed a restaurant earlier in my life, and I want to talk a little bit about the business of running a restaurant, the complexity of it, the issues, just getting good food. Raghavan, it's not as easy as it looks. What goes into running and building a restaurant as an establishment?
Well, I mean, if you look at from a business standpoint, this is probably the only business where production and consumption is at the same place. And by nature of that, you have so many variables and so many issues you deal with. It's very difficult to manage all of that and effectively run an operation, cutting your costs down at the same time.
That's a good point.
It's a lot of challenges one faces, and I think statistics show that about 80% of the restaurants fail in the first year. And
so high turnover.
Very high turnover, and out of the remaining 20%, another 60 to 70% fail the second year.
My word! So by that third year, you're venerable all of a sudden.
Well, it's a constant struggle.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's if it's done well, and if it's done, food really is the key element to a lot of these restaurants, and if it's done very well, people appreciate that, and they sometimes will overlook maybe the atmosphere. But food certainly is a drawing element.
Sure, and people develop a loyalty to favorite restaurants.
Very much so. Especially, the so-called mom and pop restaurants, there's a lot of affinity with the owners. And so they build a relationship and a rapport, and so it's also supporting them.
I know we've been up in North Minneapolis at Milda's, which has tremendous loyalty in that part of town, and I think it's known across the city, but particularly there as well. Another interesting thing about restaurants is that it's one of the few places where you pay after you enjoy the service and the product. So there's sort of a vote of confidence there that happens as well. I want to talk a little bit about what's here now and what we get to experience along Nicollet Avenue, known as Eat Street, and our crew did a little research and found out that there are at least 17 or 18 restaurants and about the same number of groceries and markets. And we just saw a little image burst there of some of the restaurants. In a moment after our interview, we'll be taking a look at some of the markets along the street. Quite a diversity there. What does that mean for you as a resident? Do you take clients to these places? Is it a matter of taking family and friends there?
It's a wonderful asset to the neighborhood to be able to explore the world right a few blocks from my home. And it's a joy to have a variety of peoples, and of course that means that there's a variety of Mexican American, Asian people in the neighborhood that have begun their businesses.
You know, it's always easy to sort of run a tape backwards and say, well, here we are, the turn of the new century, and there are dozens of these food establishments, but it wasn't always so. And a question I'd like to put to both of you, maybe start with you, Marilyn, is why here? I mean, there are a lot of other corridors in town, some more, some less successful. But what was it in your mind, and you're a veteran here of this area, what attracted people, do you think, to Nicollet Avenue? And I should mention, by the way, East Street is usually depicted as running from Grant Street down by the Convention Center all the way down to 29th Street, up behind the Kmart there. What do you think drew people here?
I think it's an active community organization and business association, a healthy attitude about the neighborhood and building the neighborhood, and low rents, I think, than downtown or Nicollet Avenue, Hennepin Avenue.
So accessible. Any thoughts on your part?
Very true. It also, places that are considered impoverished, it tends to also draw the first-time immigrants who are still getting on their feet, and so they're looking for low economic places where they could settle down and build their lives. And that's really the beauty of this area is because of that, it has really grown to what it is. And it's that it's the old American cliche, you know. I mean, you do hard work, you reap the benefits.
Yeah.
And I think you're seeing that very much so in this neighborhood. So we're very fortunate.
When I was young, people tended to think of the Hispanic community being centered over in West St. Paul, and there was a lot there.
Yeah.
I'm guessing, and maybe you've had experience to see, that these various communities that have sort of come to meet here on Nicollet, is there just sort of a synergy that after 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4 restaurants or supply houses show up, that it becomes a draw in itself? Is that part of the dynamic that goes on here?
I think it's a huge part of that, because, you know, food, again, is, you know, we'll all come back to food. Food is such a central focus in everyone's lives.
Yeah.
And so once you meet the needs of that immigrant community, through schools, through grocery stores, and through restaurants.
Something that I don't know, and I wondered if either of you do, and with your restaurant background, perhaps you do, and the business that you run, do some of the local restaurants buy in bulk or get their supplies on the street, or are we talking a different kind of distribution, maybe even outside of Minneapolis? I mean, where do they get their bulk beans and sprouts? And,
I think a lot of the bulk stuff, unfortunately, because of the large volumes they do, it has to come through a larger entity. And I know that a lot of the Asian restaurants, for instance, buy their stuff from a place in, it's called United Noodle.
Oh.
Yeah, it's right in the, is that part of the Seward neighborhood, I think?
I think I know where you're talking about, but still in the city limits, but not immediately right here.
Not immediately. I mean, there's a new grocery store, which is an expanded grocery store called Shuang Hur. And it's one of the owners is one of the sisters from the Rainbow Chinese restaurant, and they also supply wholesale to restaurants, and so you're starting to see a lot of that come into the neighborhood.
Did you say the Wong sisters?
The Wong sisters,
yeah,
yep.
Which they've got quite a few enterprises going.
Yes, they are.
Marilyn, we only have a minute or so left. Biggest changes. I asked you early on what your impressions were from, say, 20 years ago. As someone who's been paying attention, and I know you're committed to the community, and it can be impressionistic, what are the biggest changes that you feel as you come down to Nicollet Avenue, walk around the Whittier?
I feel the vitality of the businesses and the restaurants, the ethnic community converging. It was not much going on, business-wise.
Kind of quiet.
Kind of quiet, yeah. There was the Black Forest and Butler Drug.
Yeah.
And the Artist Quarter on that corner, but there wasn't much happening, and there's just lots going on, lots of people, lots of activity. It's alive.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, at almost any time of the day when you come down to East Street, I mean, there are people out and about and things like that. Quick moment, Whittier Alliance. You recently chaired that for a couple of years?
Chaired for 2 years. I'm still on the board as the vice chair. This is my 4th year.
Okay.
It's a 24-year-old organization.
Yeah.
And we really are grassroots in many ways, and we believe in the neighborhood. So we're
and another partner in helping make East Street
very big.
What it is.
It's a very big partner in making East Street what it is.
I want to thank both of you, Raghavan, Marilyn. Nice to see you. Have you here on the show. Enjoy your treats from Christos. And we'll be back in a moment with Tom Berthiaume, who's involved with the Nicollet Avenue Business Association, right after we take a look at some nice images the crew did of the groceries and markets along East Street. So stay tuned. Well, and we're back. And that was a look at some of the groceries and markets along here, and there are just tons of them. So I hope you enjoyed that little look. By the way, at this point in the show, I usually mention that at the end of our show, our monthly feature, What the Heck Is That?, will be coming up. And this month, unlike any other month, it's actually a taste test. And we've sent our crew out on the streets here along Nicollet Avenue to ask passersby, what the heck is a certain kind of food? You'll find out later. With me now is Tom Berthiaume. He wears many hats, actually, as a business person here in the Whittier neighborhood. Thomas, nice to have you on the show.
Thanks, good to see you again.
I don't even know where to begin. You have Parallel Productions around the corner from
Correct.
the Acadia Cafe. And how long have you been there with that business?
We located there in 1992, January of 92, so we've been here a while now.
Yeah, that's right, the 90s. And we're sitting, of course, on the stage here at the Acadia Cafe, which is another one of your enterprises.
Yeah, across the street we developed this building, started Acadia Cafe, and then just in the last 4 months we've developed the Acadia Cabaret Theater.
Yeah, so cafe and cabaret, and
you
we're
bet.
here on the stage for that. A lot of good entertainment goes on here.
You bet.
And we shouldn't neglect to mention that Dean Seal operates this space for you.
Dean is general manager here, and his experience, of course, with the Fringe Festival and all the other things he's done in other venues. He brings a lot of experience, a lot of excitement here.
And this is a venue for the Fringe, as I
Absolutely,
understand.
yeah. We did the Fringe Festival last summer and brought a lot of people into the area.
That's nice, good synergy.
Yep.
And you also, I believe, the title is chair. You're the chair of the Nicollet Avenue Business Association?
Yes, I am. A much coveted title.
That's right. Very interesting. The success along Nicollet Avenue had a lot of partners, a lot of people that were party to it.
You bet.
But I wondered if we could talk briefly about what it was that the Business Association had to do with it and some of the results that they've seen.
Well, right after NRP got put together, people started thinking about how we can strengthen the corridor, and we actually started talking 3 neighborhoods together: Whittier, Stevens Square, and Loring, and all 3 had some elements in common of strengthening Nicollet Avenue along this stretch. This is a stretch that has had some hard times, primarily because of the Kmart down at Lake Street interrupted the natural traffic flow.
Kind of bottled that up.
Bottled it up,
and
here, and took away the customer base in a lot of ways from the businesses that were here. So we all knew it needed help. So we went to work, did some real serious study of the area, land use planning, looked at what would make a big difference down here, and pooled together NRP monies and made our major investment in streetscape amenities. We put in 250 new street lights, ornamental lights, put in over 200 new trees, so it's a major reforestation.
Yeah.
The area, we put in nice brick piers and wrought iron railings around the parking lots, trying to make the place look friendly, look like a nice place to be, so it's not kind of flyover land anymore.
Well, and those are immediately apparent. When did that happen? When did the streetscaping get put in the ground?
It was installed summer of 97.
Of 97, so a few years. And I remember driving through here, certainly during the daytime, those piers and the fencing looked great. And at night, I'm just guessing that the placement of the streetlights, is that at a... are there more of them than there usually are?
There
because
are.
It's very bright down
There are. You could land a 747 down here if you needed to. There's a lot of light here. We knew we had some public relations issues of people.
Yeah.
Many of the customers that visited the restaurants come from suburbs or other areas, and they had some safety concerns. So we wanted to make it. We overdid it, and it really worked. We know that customers are coming here feeling better, feeling safer, feeling really comfortable being here.
Well, it's very welcoming. And then, as an earlier guest mentioned on this show, there's a lot of activity. There are a lot of people going into these restaurants and groceries and the other businesses along the street as well.
You bet. We know that if you can get a lot of people on the street, a lot of activity, the bad activity, the bad actors don't want to be there.
Yeah, they get moved aside a bit.
They get moved aside, and if they are bad actors, they want to do it in an isolated area where they aren't going to be observed. Well, and that's not the case down here anymore.
Elsewhere.
Yeah, there are a lot of eyes on the street now, and a lot of new businesses with open windows. That so the whole area is just getting stronger.
One thing
every month.
we should mention is that a major draw, as you were mentioning, the suburban clientele that comes in here. Certainly, the Children's Theater, the Minneapolis Institute of Arts, even the College of Art and Design,
Oh, you bet.
for generations have been bringing people to the area.
Incredible anchors and really a heroic effort on their part to locate here and stay here and ride out the rough times. And I think we're really coming out of the rough times. But they bring a lot of people here, and and they've got the resources to be anywhere they want. So they
Well,
really
that's right.
deserve the credit for sticking with the inner city.
That's good. Well, as we've been talking about, and we'll talk more with other guests, certainly the food is a big thing here. And I should mention to our viewers that the food that we're enjoying right here, Tom and I, this is a cilantro and tofu dish from the Rainbow Chinese Restaurant and Bar, also here right on Nicollet. And we're talking my kind of language here when we're talking tofu, because you're sitting with a vegetarian, so this is great.
I feel healthier just sitting next to it, actually.
Yeah, there's something that just sort of emanates from tofu. I
You
think.
bet.
But in addition to all the great food, and here we are at an entertainment venue, you educated me a little bit. There are other businesses here that are sort of growing as well, at least in industry fields. Can you mention some of the other things that are here?
Well, sure. There's a growing media and sort of advertising community. A couple of the businesses have been, the old 118 East 26th Street building has got a number of advertising agencies in there. Down where the old 5th Precinct was, Lamb & Company, a computer animation company, has bought that. There's Creation Audio there down by the Black Forest, has been there for many, many years.
Yeah.
It's been a recording studio for probably 40 years. There's the Ice House Studios, and then of course my place, Parallel Productions, where we shoot still photography for advertising. So there's a lot of media activity down here. Those are all really well-paying jobs. Brings in a strong clientele.
It's a vital industry. I mean, all the way around. I mean, that's a big part of what makes Minneapolis thrive, and the greater metro area is the industry you're in.
Yeah, and a lot of that industry is down in the warehouse district. This is sort of another little locus that's developing.
Yeah, and there are other business services here too. I know in preparing for this show, I mean, we talked with accountants and there are social services that are along here. So there's a lot that you can find in this part of town.
You bet. There are a lot of the businesses that help support each other. Like, I need an accountant, I need a lawyer, I need this, and we work primarily in the neighborhood. So.
That's right. Do I have this right? I think I read somewhere that in the large building right across from the McDonald's, a Waldorf school is moving in. Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct.
Or the Waldorf school.
It's a private school that's dumping big dollars into that school to develop it for their students. So
so another vote here that this is a place, because they could probably go elsewhere.
Absolutely,
if they wanted.
yeah. Well, fortunately, there were great buildings here on Nicollet Avenue, and they didn't get torn down when things were really rough. So these buildings are getting put back to work. You know, a few years ago when we moved in here, a lot of these buildings were boarded up or being used as warehouses or not being used at all. So
a lot of vacancy onto the street. And now, as I'm sitting here at the Acadia, you look right out here, and even I know the church across the street upgraded. There's some big changes afoot here right at your intersection. Is that right?
Correct. We're really, it's been in the talking stages for many years, and it looks like it's finally coming to fruition that next spring Park Nicollet Clinic will be expanding, adding a floor to their building, adding about 15,000 square feet plus employees.
And they're at Blaisdell on Franklin.
They're Blaisdell and Franklin, and then right here at the corner of Nicollet and Franklin, Franklin National Bank is planning to build a new building. They've outgrown their spot on Blaisdell, so it's we're very excited to hear that coming.
You mentioned some of the challenges. I mean, when Kmart went in a way that bottled things up, but by hook or by crook, I mean, people, the old cliche, they made lemonade out of some lemons.
You bet.
Any other challenges that you think, the results that you've seen once the streetscape went in and businesses have been coming in, and the tremendous success, I think, of the restaurants and that sort of thing, other results that you saw immediately or soon after that effort?
Well, we've gotten just an awful lot of good press from since the streetscape and since the Eat Street promotional campaign started. Joanne Christ down at the Black Forest really spearheaded that, and we've gotten articles in probably half a dozen magazines in the last 2 years. The kind of publicity you can't buy, and it's all been positive and terrific. So that's been terrific. You know, we still have some challenges on the street. You still see some street drinking that really is intolerable, and customers won't put up with it, so we have to be very
Especially
careful.
if they have choices.
Yeah, you bet. Well, and they do. They can.
There's another place to go, and they've had an experience they don't want to deal with.
So we appreciate the support that the Minneapolis Police Department and the mayor have given to those street-level livability crimes, where they've really gotten serious attention, and they need serious attention.
Well, I know the mayor also, I think over the holidays, puts together a program for Minneapolis, a couple years now, Minneapolis Unwrapped, encouraging people to do their shopping and and getting out and experience the retail and other opportunities in the Minneapolis neighborhood. So is that part of what
you
the
bet.
Business Association is involved in?
Yeah, that's a great program, and because our big competition is really, shopping centers in the suburbs, the whole city. So we've got to make our areas as friendly and clean and welcoming as any shopping center that would be out there.
Tom, we just have another minute or two left.
Sure.
Very specifically with the Business Association, what are the boundaries for that? What are the north-south kind of?
Nicollet Avenue Business Association really overlaps with the Streetscape project, which runs from Grant Street all the way down to 29th, and then a little bit of Franklin, a little bit of 26th Street. And we're here to support the effort that went into the streetscape, make sure that works, to help promote the businesses and keep communication going between the businesses, so that we're all small businesses and we don't have a lot of time to chat.
Right.
So we try to really facilitate that communication between the businesses.
And I'm assuming the association's open for membership to anybody who
Oh, absolutely.
has a business on
You bet.
Nicollet?
Anybody with a business along Nicollet or 26th, and people make time for the meetings, and we appreciate it.
One last quick question, not to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Any personal favorites, hidden delights along here that you just love? Any favorite restaurants or places you love?
Oh, wow.
Not counting the Acadia.
Not counting the Acadia,
Yeah.
which is absolutely the best.
It goes without saying.
It goes without saying. Well, actually the one thing that's kind of a hidden asset here is how well you can get pine nuts here on Nicollet Avenue.
Oh.
Okay, you go to Lund's or Byerly's and you get a little jar and it costs you about $5. Well, that $5 will buy you about 3 times as many pine nuts if you stop in one of our great Oriental groceries.
That's great to know, because I enjoy pine nuts.
Yep,
It's very
you
good.
bet.
Tom Berthiaume, thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil.
Pleasure
Good
to have
to
you
see
here.
you.
Thanks for having us here. In fact, we're going to go now to Denise Runestad, who's the manager of this facility, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the Acadia Cafe, and then I'll be back with my next guest after that. So stay tuned.
Hi, my name is Denise. We're here on the corner of Franklin and Nicollet in South Minneapolis at Acadia Cafe and Cabaret Theater. Here we have one-act plays. We're working on music. We're a coffee shop. We have beer and wine. We have waffles, soup, salads, sandwiches, pasta dishes, and our signature dish, salmon mousse.
Sure. That's very interesting. And we're back. Thank you, Denise. Nice to be here at the Acadia, which, by the way, is in the Stevens Square neighborhood. We're actually across the street from Whittier. We've been talking about Whittier a lot, but each street really pertains both to the Loring Park neighborhood and Stevens Square, Loring Heights, as well as Whittier. You are watching Inside Minneapolis. I'm Phill Lindsay, and I'm very pleased to introduce a gentleman who's been instrumental the last roughly decade in some of the growth here, John Flory. Nice to have you here.
Nice to be here with you.
Nice to be somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah.
Here at the Acadia. And before I forget, I want to mention we've been blessed with some wonderful food from different restaurants up and down East Street here. What's in front of me right here, and John, is angel hair pasta from Snoodles Restaurant, which is on the sort of the northern end of East Street here. So feel free to enjoy. I think you've got coffee from the Acadia there. Whittier CDC. The CDC stands for Community Development Corporation.
That's right.
And for those of us that work in community development, maybe that's obvious, but I'll bet a lot of folks really don't know what a Community Development Corporation means. It's a heavy moniker, but John, what is it?
Well, generally the responsibility of community development corporations is to support real estate development, or often business development and employment in low-income neighborhoods, to revitalize them, basically. The Whittier Community Development Corporation has concentrated primarily in small business development, done some real estate development and some employment work, but primarily has been involved with small business development activities.
And it's governed in what way? There's a board of directors, I
It's
assume?
a non-profit corporation that has a board of directors.
Strong ties to the community.
Yeah, it was, Whittier CDC was set up by the Whittier Neighborhood Organization and has worked as a partner organization with it for many years.
And I know from other discussions we've had in earlier programs we've done that a given CDC doesn't necessarily stay within one and only one neighborhood. In other words, some of your projects could theoretically go further afield than... We have
some loan programs that are available to adjacent neighborhoods, and we have recently worked on a project at Bloomington and Lake Street that is outside of our neighborhood, but began with residents of the neighborhood.
And I'm betting you're talking about the Mercado.
I'm talking about Mercado Central, which really started out of a local congregation in Whittier, and we had to look a little further to find the right building.
Yeah, Stephen's Church? Didn't some of that congregation start
Yeah,
there? and then
St. Stephen's, or
St. Stephen's, I'm sorry.
the Spanish congregation, which is called Sagrado Corazon, which is a very large congregation now.
So they, in a sense, share that facility?
Both the English
are based there.
Yes, are based there.
Oh, that's great. And just before we started our interview here, we were talking a little bit about some commonalities we had around food. You had some time in the food co-op movement here in the Twin Cities, but over in St. Paul, actually.
Yes.
Over at the old Mary Grove.
Yes, my introduction to business was working as a volunteer in startup cooperatives, and then eventually becoming manager of a cooperative in downtown St. Paul. And actually, I have 7 years experience managing retail stores.
Was that the Capital City Co-op?
Capital City Co-op.
That's still there, isn't it?
Still there.
Yeah.
And I managed West Bank Co-op for a couple of years before I came to work here in Whittier.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about what this particular enterprise you're involved in has been doing as would relate to Eat Street. And I know that Eat Street is a relatively new moniker that people describe, but Nicollet Avenue in particular, but Whittier in general. What are some of the projects that your organization's been involved in?
Well, the two main tools that we have used, and particularly on Nicollet Avenue, which is really the main commercial street in Whittier, have been two loan programs. One, a commercial rehab loan program that was set up in the late 70s, and I would say its primary goal is to help sustain the physical infrastructure of the business strip. And another loan program that is a micro loan program that really is geared towards quite small startup businesses, which Nicollet Avenue has seen many startup businesses develop, and some of them prosper and become very successful.
Sure,
and in the last 10-year period.
Yeah, and it's in the nature of businesses that not 100% are always going to succeed, but with this early support, and it sounds to me like some of the synergism that they're experiencing here, they've got maybe a little better shot.
Well, you hear statistics of 90% failure rates. My experience is the success rates, I'd rather talk about success rates, are 50 to 60%, and but it's difficult work, and I would say the revitalization of Nicollet Avenue, and it did have many vacant storefronts 10 years ago, but the revitalization of it is really derives from the hard work of entrepreneurs, many of them starting up new businesses, many of them immigrants, and they have really brought strength to Nicollet Avenue.
Indeed. I mean, it's evident as one comes through here, and I want to repeat, too, it's true during the daytime. It's also true in the evenings, when a lot of folks are leaving work. There's a healthy life going on in the street here into the evening hours as well.
Yes.
Biggest surprises? Anything surprised you about what's been going on here that you wouldn't have expected from a development point of view?
Well, I don't know if it was a surprise to me, but I think very early when I arrived to go to work on Nicollet Avenue, it became clear to me that the business community was in a process of transition, and the business community in 10 or 15 years was going to be a completely different community. I think what surprised a lot of people, but became fairly obvious to me within several months of working here, that the group of business entrepreneurs that were going to have the biggest impact on revitalizing Nicollet Avenue were Asian immigrants that no one had planned for as being a redevelopment force. And so I think it surprised me at first, but it became clear that they were really probably the biggest resource the neighborhood had to work with in revitalizing Nicollet.
Very interesting. Earlier, you and I had talked about how that energy has also affected the stabilization or the reuse of a lot of buildings along here. And Tom Berthiaume mentioned too that one of the assets that was here back when the challenges were higher were some good buildings. What have you seen in terms of the building reuse and shuffling around?
I was going to mention that when I first came to work for the CDC, we had a list of vacant storefronts or vacant spaces that were available. And every quarter, I would canvass the neighborhood to see what spaces were available, and we tried to market those spaces. After about 3 years, we stopped doing it because the vacancies disappeared. Wow. Really dating back probably to development at Lake and Nicollet, when Nicollet was closed as a through street, many vacancies developed as businesses that had been open on Nicollet for years began to leave the area. And in the last 15 years, in some stretches of Nicollet, as many as 80% of previous businesses have left. Those businesses have been replaced primarily by immigrant entrepreneurs, and over a period of time, particularly in the last 5 years, they have been, as their businesses grow to a level where they can afford it, they have been buying the buildings. So that this morning, as I went through a list of building transactions, there have been 18 buildings, mostly in the last 5 years, that have been purchased by Asian business owners who began arriving here almost 15 years ago.
And presumably that's much, this probably has the same effect that home ownership means to a community, is that when somebody owns the business they're in, the property that they're in, the maintenance is going to be up and the commitment to it is
There were
solid.
several key properties that were owned by absentee owners that didn't make improvements in the buildings. I think a key building at 2 key buildings at 26th and Nicollet, the owner lived in Florida, went into bankruptcy, which was a problem but turned out to be an opportunity for an Asian business at the corner that bought both those buildings and then gradually began making improvements in the buildings. So as businesses that occupied the buildings have been buying them, it's definitely in their interest to make improvements, and it's beginning to bring back buildings that did go through periods in which not very much upkeep was done.
As the development corporation that you're part of, partners, if I can use that as a verb, with individual entrepreneurs or perhaps other organizations, how does the financing work? You bring a certain amount to the table and they're expected as well to bring some? How does
Well, it varies from project to project. With the commercial rehab loan program, the Whittier neighborhood, and actually it's a Whittier Alliance program that the CDC administers, provides 50% of financing for building improvements at 2% interest, and we work with the business's bank. The bank actually makes the loan, but that's a partnership with the bank. Certainly the business has to put a great deal of investment into developing the business so that they're a bankable loan. It depends on the situation. In some cases, a number of buildings have been redeveloped, or in some cases built. 2 new buildings were built, really with 3 new buildings were built with SBA financing.
Okay, Small Business Administration, federal program.
Federal financing. Butler Drug burned down.
Oh, that's right, and they reclaimed it.
And I think a major sort of question was what would happen with Butler Drug. They built a new building, stayed in the neighborhood, and that was really based on a package of financing that included city financing, financing from the Small Business Administration, and I think that was a real important symbolic effort on Butler Drug's part to rebuild.
And that's a key intersection, a key location.
Key intersection,
to all
downtown
of this.
Whittier.
That's right, 100% corner of Whittier.
Yeah.
We've got just a moment left, and I want to put you on the spot. If someone said to you, and I'm about to do it, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, what's your gut instinct? More success like this?
Oh, Nicollet Avenue has turned the corner and is on the way up. 10 years ago, there was doubt as to what the future of Nicollet Avenue, what the future held. I think there's going to be a prosperous business community. It's going to thrive. It's definitely varied. It's a big contrast to the development at Lake Street and Nicollet, but it's a very unusual spot. It's the only spot like it in the Twin Cities.
John, thank you very much. Pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
Well, in a moment, I'm going to be talking with Joanne Christ from the Black Forest Inn. We're going to be talking about getting the word out about Eat Street. But first, it's time for our monthly feature, Did You Know? excuse me here. Well, the image you just saw was of the first Free Baptist Church, which was on the northwest corner of West 15th at Nicollet, a building that no longer exists, but a very nice image that we found. My next guest is a woman who is a veteran of these parts here along Eat Street, and also can talk with us a little bit about getting the word out about Eat Street. So Joanne Christ from the Black Forest Inn.
That's right.
Pleasure to meet you and have you on the show.
Nice to
I was
meet you.
mentioning earlier that for a year, probably for a generation, I've been eating at the Black Forest, and indeed the Black Forest was there before a lot of this hoopla kind of came up. What brought you to the corner of 26th and Nicollet?
Well, me personally, I came to work at the already existent Black Forest Inn as a German student at the University of Minnesota. My husband and his brother came and started the restaurant the 15th of May, 1965.
All right.
Both immigrants from Germany, and Irish had just finished his little stint in the Army and needed a job and a place to be, and this was it. And it was already named the Black Forest. It had been the Black Forest Inn for about a half a year, kind of as an attempt to sell it, I think, was.
Oh, I see. And they saw him coming or something?
I think something said, there's this man coming this way, and he looks like a easy target.
There
so
you
he
go.
was.
So they put that on maybe almost as a marketing effort or
Yes,
something.
I think it was.
And he said, I can do that. Now,
That's
was he a cook? Was he a...
He was trained both in butchering and in cooking in Germany.
Okay.
He did 2 apprenticeships.
Now, may I ask this? I've never asked this question. Which part of Germany? Because the culinary traditions are different.
Yes, he was born in Mannheim, so his is a southwestern tradition.
Okay, I want to say Bavaria, but I'm wrong.
No, that's not right. It's and it's not the Black Forest either. It's a little north of the Black Forest.
Oh, okay, very interesting. So he's got this restaurant, and you're studying German at the U.
Right.
And I'm guessing in those days there weren't a whole lot of German restaurants in the Twin Cities.
No, there were maybe 1 or 2 others.
There was a wonderful one for a while down on Hennepin Avenue that closed about 10 years ago.
Yes, I've forgotten the name.
I
but
have
at
as well.
the time that we started, there was a place called the Heidelberg, which was out in, I think, Richfield.
Yeah, I've heard of
And there was
Heidelberg.
another place called the Mississippi Market or something like that, a little smaller, but had a nice reputation. It didn't last too much longer.
So as a German student, you're thinking, well, maybe I ought to try some of the German food, and that's where you went?
That's right. There seemed to be an arguable connection between studying German and working in a German restaurant.
So there you were, and you liked the food that you experienced. By the way, I should say we are not sitting here with food from your restaurant, but we are enjoying items here from Tacos Morelos, which is on 26th Street. What we have is pico de gallo over here, and we also have arroz con frijoles. So thanks to Tacos Morelos, we've been sort of sampling food from around the Eat Street area. And of course, you folks are known for the foods of Germany, and you have, in addition to the Black Forest Inn, you have the Strudel and Noodle right around the corner.
Right.
And that's a deli.
It's a deli, right. And we serve breakfasts and lunches, but we also sell a lot of bulk food. So if somebody wants a whole 50 spätzle orders or Hungarian goulash or a whole tort or strudel, that's the,
so they can get it in bulk.
the spot.
And you have a catering
and we have a banquet
as well.
space, a banquet
Or
space.
banquet, I should say.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
That's
around the corner.
Seats up to 100. It has a lot of lovely hand painting in it too, like the Black Forest.
And earlier we were talking that my first introduction to your facility, your inn there, was I had friends back in the 60s and 70s who were involved with the Children's Theater, who were an active clientele. And you said there was an interesting story on how your garden sort of came to be. Can you briefly mention how you decided to do that?
Right. Well, we did grow up with the Children's Theater. I think they were founded also in 64 or 65, and also the art school has always been a real
Minneapolis College of Art and Design,
integral part of our clientele and the input that we've gotten over the years. And we had a little underutilized space on 26th Street between the restaurant and what was then a body shop. And Carlos, one of the very colorful and wonderful folks from the Children's Theater, had said, this looks like a very likely spot for a garden. And at that time, the Institute was being redesigned by some wonderful...
Kenzo Tange.
Yes, from Japan. And so he was talking to them about designing a Japanese-style garden, which sounded fine to us. And so as those things go, it took a while for us to really turn that around into an idea. And by then, the architects were long gone, but the idea had crept out into the community somewhere there, and we were sort of committed through Barbara Flanagan getting wind of it. And
she was a
other
great
people.
advant for outdoor dining.
Yes,
I know.
she was.
And
It
to this
is.
day,
Yeah. Still is.
Well, that's a
right.
neat story.
Yeah.
So Carlos and some of those folks in Children's Theater helped to kind of plant the seed for that.
Yeah, and do a lot for the place.
Yeah.
Artistically, they did. Jack Barkla has been
Yeah.
really very integral in designing the outside and the inside with a very nice light touch. Yes.
From those days, going back as far as the 60s, certainly into the 70s, do you have any memory of what other restaurants might have been around then? I mean, I remember the Little Tijuana.
Right.
And I believe they were by family related to Mama Coronado's, which was a facility, a restaurant down on Block E back in the 60s. And there was Little Joe's. Haven't they been around forever?
Yeah, Joe's has been there for a long time. There was a place called Tommy's Clock at that time that a lot of the students from the art school frequented. Let's see, and I guess up the block, the other direction was a place called the Vice President, up between the 31st and 32nd.
Well, there was the president, and then there was the vice president.
Called the president, rather, right, the vice president.
There was a vice president another block over.
Right.
Yeah.
The president was kind of the, that was the suit and tie place.
Well, and what is now Porter's has been a number of things going back to Hooley's, I think.
Hooley's, right,
yeah. So there's only been some food presence, but nothing like today.
No, it really did take off, I don't know, 15 years ago or so. It just suddenly, there were all these wonderful choices up and down the block from nowhere. And they mostly started out very low key, so we hardly saw it happening. But it became something pretty significant.
Yeah,
and
as we were sitting down and I was explaining how we were going to have some food here, not from the Black Forest, but from Tacos Morelos, you said, well, that's great. You love it as a destination.
Oh yeah, I think it's a wonderful idea, and it's something that I've really been working to promote, that this is a tremendous resource for this city and for travelers to the city. And it's just really a question of getting people to realize that and to notice that it's all there. I mean, it was all there before it got a name and an identity. And
when you mentioned the name, and someone told me, maybe you can confirm this, that it was Jeremy Iggers, a food writer, that probably first came up with the name Eat Street in an article he did. Is that, am I?
It was Eats Street, and it was a full-page, nice review of a number of places, and many of them lesser-known places along
And he kind of
Nicollet
saw
Avenue.
the pattern that, hey, there was a lot of food down there.
He certainly did, yeah.
That's pretty good. And as you mentioned, a great place for people to come. The northern boundary is really anchored by the convention center and really the central business district, and with 1.5 million plus coming to the convention center. What a great opportunity for people to come down here for a bite to eat.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You've had a hand in creating something very interesting called the Arts and Eats Express. What is that?
Well, that is a bus, a circulator bus, really, that starts at the convention center and runs through downtown and then up and down Nicollet, also to the Walker Art Center in Guthrie and over to the Institute of Art. So it really hits a lot of places in a nice short ride that people who are either traveling or even are downtown for other reasons they can access very easily and quickly. It's a development that I think Karen Clark from the legislature was very instrumental in getting going, and she really felt strongly that the convention center had by facing in the other direction had left some of the neighborhoods out of some of its vision.
Behind it, as it were.
Right, and that this presented a way to bring it back in, and so there are now two different bus routes, but ours was the first here, and it's really quite successful.
And how do people access? I mean, they can actually flag it down at a corner and
That's
get
right.
on. And
yeah, just like it's run like
a regular bus.
It's a regular bus. It runs all day, and
in case people haven't seen it, it's very colorfully decorated,
Yes.
and it says right on it, Arts and Eats Express.
That's right.
Do you know offhand the hours? I mean, is it mostly a daytime, or is it going to the
well,
evening?
it runs from, I believe, 11 in the morning till at least 11 at night.
Oh, that's
so
very good.
It's every day, and it's,
So you could be
very
staying
regular.
at the Hyatt Hotel and be taking that back and forth. You've got your own shuttle there, essentially.
That's right. Or go to the Institute and see that, and then stop at any of a number of restaurants, and even go over to the Walker, all as part of your same
That's
route.
handy.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, tell me, what other kind of promotional efforts are you all, and by extension, who all is working on promotion and getting the word out about arts, not Arts and Eats, but Eat Street itself? What are you doing to let people know about this great treasure here?
Well, we had the first step for us was really to establish an identity that we could very clearly communicate in a number of ways. So really, historically what happened was we started by doing the streetscape improvement. We started by looking at ourselves and saying, you know, we're getting a little down at the edges, and what can we do to really make it look better? This is before we'd even thought about promotion as such. This was really structural. And a very nice group developed and a nice rapport among owners and businesses and residents here.
And not only in the restaurant and the food business, but across all of those business lines.
No, very much so. And the streetscape developed very nicely, well thought out, and it looks good. It brought a lot of light and some trees, and as our enthusiasm for that project increased, we then started to realize that what we have to do then to maintain it, to not just have this be a one-shot deal and then maybe let that decline until the next time we saw it looking crumbly, that we really needed to develop a marketing strategy for this area. And a number of us saw that a lot of what was important about this area was really the food, the grocery stores, delis, and restaurants that had developed over the years, and decided that that would be a way to look at this area and to have other people aware of it, focusing on food as such. And so at that point we developed a little subcommittee and decided that one of the first things we wanted to do was to get some outside help. So we really went out with our hat in our hand and said, is there a group out there, a marketing advertising group that would consider the plight, that had a commitment to the city? And you were able to find someone that could do that? And we did find a group that was able to do, was willing and able, and did a very nice job. And they really did focus our energies and our thoughts and helped us to decide that that was the name to go with, and that there were some things that we could do to get that word out there very effectively. And so that's where it started, really, was the name and an image, you know, a little bit.
And we're just out of time, but in a word, successful?
Very. Beyond our wildest dreams.
That's great. Congratulations. Joanne, very nice to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Well, I'll be back to wrap up the show in a moment, but first we're going to go out and find out some answers to this month's What the Heck Is That? And as I mentioned at the part of the show that we first mentioned it, it's a taste test. What the heck is this particular food? Let's find out some wrong answers.
Got some vinegar in it. I don't have any clue. This is bread.
That's good.
It's not something really gross, is it?
No.
I have no idea. I have no idea. Are you going to tell us?
It don't look very appetizing. No, I'm not going to eat that.
Oh, it looks like oatmeal. Okay, let's see. And then I gotta eat it, huh?
What is it?
What is it? It tastes better than it looks.
Mustard.
It tastes lemon and garlic. It seems like a chickpea, but maybe it's soy.
It's very good. I have no idea what it is, to tell you the truth. This is pita bread, and is it like an avocado type? No. Artichoke.
Garlic. I don't know.
That's pretty good. You know, I really couldn't give you a definite on what this may be. It's just a piece of bread of some sort, and I can't really tell you what's in the sauce or in the dip, so.
Well, and of course, we better find out what the heck it really is. Let's find out from a gentleman who knows.
My name is Gus Parpos. I'm the owner of Christos Greek Restaurant on Nicollet Avenue in Minneapolis. The dish that we are looking at here is melanzano salata. Again, melanzano salata. It's an eggplant dish, which is very popular, of course, in Greece and all of the Middle East. Its ingredients are roasted eggplant, extra virgin olive oil, garlic, and lemon. Okay. It's a simpler version than the Middle Eastern one, which includes often other things like mayonnaise or once in a while tahini, which is sesame seed paste. This is just pure. It's a very popular item and very, very healthy.
Well, thanks, Gus. Of course, it's good to know what that really was, and by the way, it is very good. Now, in my hands here, I have an example of one of the signature appetizers from the Acadia Cafe. It's their salmon mousse, and I know these guys back here are just ready to get to it. Now, next month on Inside Minneapolis, we're going to go back downtown. We're going to take a look at some of the major developments happening around the Milwaukee Depot over in Industry Square. Big doings down there in that part of town. Now, if you want to get in touch with us, of course, we have a hotline, 673-2234, and you get hold of us on our website. That's listed in our catalog of useful resources. That's also at the end of the show. And along that catalog and with our credits, we always put up an interesting historical picture. So I hope you've enjoyed this edition of Inside Minneapolis. I'll see you next time. I'm Phill Lindsay. Now, okay, guys, easy does it now. You can each have a bite. There you go. There you go, yeah.